Hey guys, it's Frito here. I have a bunch of Season 18 videos in the pipeline with gameplay examples, but to give an overview of the entire game, Season 18 I think is the best season of Overwatch since release. The perk system was already a massive improvement to the game, and they have just emboldened it to be even more powerful and interesting, and that has been amazing. Now, we'll get an overview of how the heroes are functioning. The first thing I want to say, the new hero, Wuyang, I do think is an S-tier hero. However, his skill floor is really high, and my expectation is that when players that aren't going to actually commit to learning him stop playing him, we're going to see his performance go up. I think at the moment you have no idea if your Wuyang is going to be the best player in the lobby or absolutely useless. He's very difficult and technical to play and different in terms of what he needs to do, but also what the rest of the team should do around him. It sort of feels like when they added Kiriko early in Overwatch 2's release, and players weren't really sure, like, is it better for the Kiriko to go flank hard in the enemy's backline, or do they all play together in Deathball? And the different balancing as well as the community's perception on what you should do changed pretty radically. It's important for him to play super far out of the way and spam from range around corners and have his tank go hard in and hard out. The hard engaged tanks play the best with Wuyang because his ultimate synergizes with them so well. The best one overall is Mauga, because not only does he have the hit scan, burn, and hard commit gameplay, but he has the self heal in order to give himself an extra life while going in, and the horizontal mobility to play kind of similar to the Wuyang mobility. They both can really clear some distance going far. And while there are some answers in the game that can compete up against this, remember Mauga's sprint has his own unstoppable effect. So not only does him slamming with overrun apply a stun, him doing so with the Wuyang ult on top of him adds a double stun effect. And so he can both track down a Wuyang and interact with the Wuyang. There's only so many heroes that can do that type of thing. Like Rein's shield can block it, Orisa has Fortify, Zarya is really good with the perks. I actually think her perks put her up in S tier as well, but a lot of these other tanks that got nerfed a bit are not as high up as you might think. Due to the Wuyang meta, I put Wrecking Ball a bit higher. I think Roadhog, after the rework, is really hit and miss. Like, he needs to have the perfect counter pick tank matchup to not get exploited. And with how good Mauga is, I think Mauga just kind of farms Hog now, and it's really hard to outplay him. Once you get to level 3 with D.Va, then you can really take over the game. But because Zarya is already so good, it's a little difficult to play that matchup. Doomfist, I think, is getting left behind a little bit in the perks meta, because when Overwatch 2 released, he was this skill-expressive tank that had boom bust gameplay, but now a lot of the tanks function that way with the way perks work. His perks aren't so transformative. They don't really give him an extra playstyle, so to speak. They just kind of make his Doomfist thing a little better, and a lot of the tanks already are doing outrageous things. I think the more I think about it, Rein and Sig are kind of similar in power due to Sig's nerfs. He's one of the few tanks that did get significantly nerfed, mainly due to the changes to armor, but also because there is a full second delay between using block. So they're about similar for me. Orisa's perk to get healing while using her ultimate is really strong, but she's pretty one note in what she does as well. I do think she's slightly above Hazard. Hazard, you can maybe skip up a tier if you are a specialist at him, but I don't find him that hard to play against as either of these tanks, especially Mauga, as long as you remember the key moments to get behind his block. Sigma, I think, is situational and map dependent. I like Queen's new perk that allows her to be able to cast her ultimate with gaining unstoppable, and that's pretty good when you consider that's an option up against the Wuyang ult. I do think with her skill expression, though, perhaps better than D.Va, especially if there's more Wuyang getting played. She plays that mobility game with her entire playstyle a bit better, but just a little bit out of reach. You kind of see how these tanks can really move around. Zarya has the option to move with the rocket jump perk, but kind of the best, in my opinion, playing that mid-range brawler role. I hate that they took away Winston's perk to destroy deployables more. I really tried to make sense of the throwing his barrier perk, which you would think might be good up against, let's say, Ana throwing a sleep at you mid-air or something, but most of the time that type of play was so bad anyway, and it doesn't like make you reliably land the dive going aggressive like that I just don't even think you should try to be using it. That's my current standpoint. Maybe it evolves over time where throwing the barrier midair kind of blocks a Roadhog hook. Maybe the skill expression just isn't there for me yet, but I already thought his other perk one, where you get increased primal damage midair, gave you a carry output play that Winston really needs in the perk meta anyway. Like, if you're not up trading somewhere with your perk, I think you're kind of making a mistake. And Winston, once I look at the entire lineup and what we'll expect to play with and against, while it's pretty hard to track down a Wuyang, and especially when you start to go up against like an Ana Wuyang combo, that backline can heal amp itself almost infinitely. Winston can feel a bit annoyed fighting against it, but he's like the most teamwork tank there is out of all of the options available. Ram might go a little higher, actually, now that I think about it. These two, I think I am at the end going to put them above Orisa and Hazard, mainly because they are a brawl style and their brawling front line is going to outpace Wuyang most of the time. Like, this play really wants to be able to isolate something and hard engage onto it, but if you play a good brawl comp and your team works together, you can kind of outplay that, especially if you use the shield of either of these tanks to block the Wuyang ult. Brawling styles of play aren't bad necessarily. They're just gonna be a little less popular with this guy having so much skill potential. Onto the damage category now. One of my favorite DPS, Pharah, I'm gonna put in B tier. He's the reason. Loses out in the perks meta. The new perk that she got is much worse than the conch that used to be a mini grav that was way stronger. But also just the nature of the game, because it's more of a hard engage meta, it's a little hard for Pharah to interact. Like, she would rather you play slow and navigate around you, and she sort of makes the decisions on if it's a hard engage or not. Whereas when you're up against characters like this, the Wuyang, while can't really hit her, plays out of range from her, so I just think she has a little bit of a hard time with how fast things are happening. Hit scans that got upgraded, Cassidy and Soldier especially, his stim pack perk is pretty nuts. Cassidy's little sniper rifle I had put up there as one of the better perks in the game right now. They're pretty nuts. Sojourn in theory got nerfed, but actually got buffed in some key ways. So while the Sojourn with a mercy pocket playing in the front line is definitely worse, now that she has 225 HP, it already was the case that she had one of the best offensive categories for the damage roll and a huge mobility escape with the possibility of having two of them. So you don't really have to play in a way that requires you to have 250 health in the front. I think if you just adapt your playstyle and be a little bit more skirmish reliant, while there's certain things like maybe a Roadhog hook or the snipers maybe take you out a little bit easier as Sojourn, overall she's just a great Overwatch 2 character, and they made some improvements to her both in her kit as well as getting a much more useful perk where she gains rail charge while sliding. So I actually think Sojourn is like not lost a whole bunch anyway. Some of the flex DPS are really giga buffed in terms of their perks and potential. It's just that like the more consistent carry DPS picks like Genji and Tracer are so insane with what they can potentially do, it's kind of tough to ever outmatch them. So I don't put Bastion and Junkrat down here in B tier as terms of like they're just not very good, because actually Bastion's nade perk as well as Junkrat's higher rate of fire and conch resets are incredible in theory. So when you get these to work, they hard roll, but there's just so many maps where you're probably going to need a more skill expressive DPS, and I think you've got to pick some of these. I'm going to put Tracer and Genji slightly above Soldier, but on any of their given maps, they can absolutely pop off. And in fact, with a skilled Genji being able to get a shorter reset on your dash, you might even put this guy up in S tier in theory. Same thing with Tracer. I mean, she can get more ammo and meleeing. I mean, the skill expression out of these perks is utterly insane. I'd put Hanzo lower, but when I start to look at the B tier category and start to think about what Hanzo has a matchup against, he kind of counters the rest of the things under him. So I'll put him there. Mei's perks are really boring and not very good. I've got Reaper at the top of the B tier because he actually has a super reliable matchup against a lot of these top picks. Zarya, Maga, Wrecking Ball. His perks make him incredibly reliable. Reaper can scary take over the game. I'm gonna put him in A tier actually. The game's a bit out of Torb's hands right now. In a slower meta, he can grind out engagements, but I actually think that's kind of similar to Pharah's problem. There's a lot of spamming without a lot of connection, and because it's hard engage in and out, you're not going to get the opportunity. You're not really thwarting the enemy by just having a turret. They're usually going to run past it and ignore it. So Torb a lot of times is just feeding ult charge, it feels like. Symmetra, though, does have her few maps where she's just incredibly oppressive. I actually think she's better. She's the best turret DPS right now. Got options with her perks to gain power with the teleporter, but as long as you can focus your damage on the low ground, which I think you can because the flyers just aren't really cutting it right now, she's got one of her better meta states at the moment. I don't think Echo's very good either. Maybe slightly worse than Pharah. I don't know. They're kind of similar in power. Widowmaker will stay here. Sombra up top of the B tier. Widow got some insane buffs, mainly because I think she gets banned so much for her best maps. So that means if you start to learn her on some of her odd maps, she's going to perform better there. That's kind of their philosophy. We'll put Freya. She's kind of gimmick, just above Hanzo. These other DPS picks above Freya are more reliable. More players know how to play them. I think if you master Freya, though, you'd put her right up next to Sojourn, but there's just the player base isn't quite there yet. I mean, maybe that's the argument. Maybe the tier list should just be like what the hero can actually do. So we'll do that. So I had that same philosophy for Wuyang, so we'll keep that consistent. Ashe, Hanzo, I don't know. I think Hanzo's perks make him really reliable, and they kind of play the same position. It's kind of the issue. So Ashe's ult is technically better, but if you have combos with Mauga or Zarya, then Hanzo's ult is just fine. Hanzo gets more lunge cooldown or faster fire rate when making a body shot. That makes him, I think, just a little bit easier and more reliable to play than Ashe, but your skill can vary. All of these picks in the A category are fine DPS. I'll put Venture at the bottom of A. Hard engage style character, but you really have to commit to taking chances and being all in, and hopefully the enemy team doesn't punish you. Venture's perks were quite an improvement this season as well. Since a lot of Venture's damage is budgeted towards the melee, I find it best to go up against a Diva, who otherwise can eat a lot of damage from these other picks. I also think Venture is pretty underrated up against Mauga, since he really likes to ignite a target, and Venture can go underground and get a self-cleanse and then all in something. Mauga doesn't really get the opportunity to very easily lock down Venture. But because Venture has worse matchups than the more flexible mainstream carry DPS picks above them, then I have to put Venture at the bottom of A, I feel, which is still a really strong place for the character who has a pretty simple gameplay loop. Onto the support category now. Well, we've already got Wuyang up here in S tier. What else is pretty good? Well, if you remember, if the principle of the Season 18 meta of its highest order is going to be hard engage characters, that means characters that have high upside on their cooldowns and are kind of all in on that one play, and they're not going to sustain so much. So that's a very different meta than what we've played in a while, but that is Ana in a nutshell, where she's going to play back, the Wuyang is going to be skirmishing about, and a big percentage of the value is in these long cooldowns and their big impact. Two different heal amps and Ana's big play with either Sleep Dart or Anti-Nade. Lot of playmaking to be had. I've kind of been seeing Juno get torched because while Juno offers speed to the team, the thing is Wuyang typically plays with tanks that can move, or Zarya maybe gets her rocket jumps. So what are you really moving around with Juno, and what's your big play afterwards? Because Juno's ult looks like a joke compared to the Wuyang ult, which gives an Earthshatter style effect. It's an offensive and defensive ult. So if your team comp is already countering the enemy, then Juno is going to do a lot, but it's pretty tough to compete with these characters that are kind of like think about it, look at these characters, right? Wuyang, Ana, they give a whole lot of resources to one guy, and you tell your Mauga or your Wrecking Ball or your Genji Blade, you tell that guy to go in and he's going to kill everybody. You don't really want these big teamwork abilities right now in Season 18 because it's harder to execute. You're not going to get as much bang for your buck. I do like playing Juno on a map like Esperanza, for example. But if you're going to go for this kind of heal body style support, I think Moira is a bit better. And a note about Season 18's gameplay is that the team comps matter way more. Like sometimes there's certain metas where, well, you can kind of deathmatch on anything. Different seasons have felt like that for me, but the strategy of Season 18 is pretty punishing if you're on the wrong tank and support line. Similarly, I haven't quite seen Lucio be all that useful, but let's put him at the top of B tier or something. Try to remember as well, they took out Juno's perk to let her crit. So that means that her damage output isn't that scary, whereas Lucio at least does have some kill opportunities. For the heal focus supports, Mercy and Lifeweaver, they can actually play in this hard engage style because they play in the back safe and just run around in circles. So when your tank runs hard in and out, these are okay. They're not as good as Wuyang, and you're not gonna have as much upside as Ana, but they function in the meta all right. I think they're ultimately going to keep them themselves alive a bit better up against those hard engages, whereas Juno up against the Ball or Maga, you're kind of going to get overwhelmed or just not do enough to compete up against some of these brawler type picks, Queen and Zarya comps. Now, Moira did get some pretty amazing perks, but I think Briggs are better. When we think about these healing focused tile supports, Brig is up there ahead of all of them because she has some playmaking and offense and good tank interactions. Whereas these other supports need to run away, Brig has some playmaking in order to fight, especially some of these DPS head up on her own. So that's highly valued as well. I also think Iliari is maybe one of the most underrated supports in the entire game. Iliari is just the ranged poke version of Brig, and I don't think a lot of people realize that. An unpopular hero, but really can hold it down if your positioning is good and your aim on your primary fire. This would be a counter meta strategy though, not really playing for the all-in, but more so to defend against it, similar to Brig. I think there's a few maps that are still sniper maps, and that's why I'll put Zen up here at the top of A tier, but kind of nowhere else. When you set up Zen and fire down a lane, pretty nuts what he can do. Colosseo, Circuit, Junkertown, those maps exist, and Zen still looks fine there. Just try to avoid playing him on the wide open flashpoint maps where you have to clear lots of distance. You're just going to be feasted on there. Kiriko's got a cleanse, but the other supports I think just outpace her in terms of the ult and offensive value. If you're insane with her, you can maybe pick that perk that allows you to be really upgraded with your offense, but I just think it's a bit unreliable and too hard to do, whereas the offense of these three supports is much more reliable. Bap got a new perk that I think is maybe one of the more overrated in the entire game, where he can reload his ammo. I actually go for the healing one that's a little bit more reliable, the shoulder mounted healing, because it's a bigger burst of impact overall when you just hit a button. So I love Bap. He's one of my best supports, but I don't really see him too often, and I think he's just somewhere in this like heal bot section. Thanks to his mobility, he's somewhat more playable. I think it's a little hard for me to decide. Map depending, he's more of that back foot style support. Yeah, I think overall, if you wanted to play any of these characters, you'd get a similar amount of healing and more output on Bap. So we're going to put him actually above Zen even. Yeah, up here in the A tier. So fairly balanced game. But it's been balanced for a while, where there wasn't necessarily huge changes that they needed to make on the hero stats side, but because big perks were changed, as well as them keep adding maps. Like, for example, a character like Sigma might be higher on the tier list if there was just more Sigma-based maps, or if they made his Levitate perk his perk 1, which might be OP, but that would get him to be more playable. Because I think even with him having the ability to fly, he can't use it until later into the game, and because it doesn't take over the game. Typically you need that early perk to be able to sustain you in the matchup, and I don't think you take over the game necessarily just because you can fly. Like, you would prefer to be able to have that, like Zarya can get rocket jumps in perk 1, and Sig's got to wait until you're already on point C, or you already full held or whatever, right? Like, it's too late in a lot of cases. So that's something to think about if we want to see Sig get more playtime. But the game's pretty balanced, hard engaged meta. It's been pretty fun to play. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to leave it a like, and don't forget to click subscribe and the bell icon to actually get notified when my videos come out. That's been it for me. I've been Frito. I'll see you guys next time.